The Disciplines Essential in the Spiritual Aspirant, Part 16, Sri Muruganar, translated and presented by Robert Butler.
இருந்தபடி நான் இராமல் எழுந்தே வருந்தும் வகை கண்டு கொண்டேன். இருந்தபடி நான் இராமல் எழுந்தே வருந்தும் வகை கண்டு கொண்டேன். மருந்து இதற்கு உன்வாய் மலர்ந்த நான் ஆரியன் வாசகமே. மருந்து இதற்கு உன்வாய் மலர்ந்த நானாரியன் வாசகமே. யான் உட்கொண்டு ஓய்வுற நீயே அருளால் ஊட்டு. இருந்தபடி நான் இராமல் எழுந்தே வருந்தும் வகை கண்டு கொண்டேன். மருந்திதற்கு உன்வாய் மலர்ந்த நானார் என் வாசகமே. யான் உட்கொண்டு ஓய்வுற நீயே அருளால் ஊட்டு. அருளால் நீயே அருளால் ஊட்டு.
All this I clearly recognized. What you prescribed was the investigation. Who am I? Pray feed it to me through your grace and bring me to salvation's place.
Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramana. So we'll get started today with Neṟis, or disciplines dealing with the delusive ego. We'll get started first with Neṟis 40.
தனித்தன்மையாம் சித் சட அகங்காரமற்ற அனைத்தும் தானா மெய்யறிவா விளங்கே.
Robert, you want to go ahead?
Shine with the true awareness that all is oneself, free of individuality, which consists of the ego, which is an amalgam of the sentient, chit, and the insentient, jada.
So we'll look at the explanations on this verse. We have some pictures here to go with it. Before that, Robert, do you want to go ahead and read your comment?
Yes, the term Chit Jada Granthi, the knot that binds insentient to the sentient, is a term which many people will know and understand intellectually. Others are quite confused by it. Seems like a bit of Sanskrit mumbo jumbo to them. Few are those, however, who have a feel for what it actually means in practice. The Chit Jada Granthi is the illusion that causes an insentient world to appear, or rather to appear in the pure awareness of the self. And we're going to sort of try to illustrate this as a feeling rather than as a thought in the next 3 slides.
Yeah. So Chit Jada Granthi is the knot that binds the insentient to the sentient.
Yeah, just to make it clear, it is actually the same thing as the ego. Bhagavan gives these synonyms for it. Bondage, the individual soul, the subtle body, the ego, samsara, the worldly condition, the mind. These are all Chit Jada Granthi. It's all the same thing. It's the bond.
Right. Okay, so
yeah, what I would like people to imagine is that imagine that you've just woken up from a deep sleep and you know you slept well, it was blissful because you weren't there in the sleep as an ego, but when you wake up, you have that feeling that, that was blissful, right? So that's the situation we're in, and that's the situation we're in pure sleep, except that we, in deep sleep, we don't have the awareness. So if we go to the next slide, the ego is like a prism splitting up the pure light of the self to create the appearance of a world, but in reality, it is only the underlying self which now remains unperceived. And that's important because now we're just, the ego's risen and it's created a dichotomy of a subtle mind seeing a gross concrete universe. And we don't see the underlying self at this point. So we're just jumping from color to color, from thought to thought without any background. So we're basically, we're floundering basically in this sea of Maya. So if we go to the next slide.
So this is what you mean by when you see the world, you don't see the self, and when you see the self.
Yes. But that doesn't have to be true if we follow Bhagavan's teaching. And
right.
And so if we go to the next slide, we see if the ego goes, the world is still there, but it's now sitting on the background, the same background we had in the deep sleep of pure peace. And if we can maintain that awareness, we can see this ocean of peace with thoughts arising on it like waves and subsiding. So we don't have to worry about it. Bhagavan says at one point in talk 46, realize your pure being. Let there be no confusion with the body. The body is a result of thoughts. The thoughts will play as usual, but you will not be affected. You were not concerned with the body when asleep, so you can always so remain unconcerned. But only if the ego, that subtle attachment, is gone. And the only way we can achieve that is through self-attention, as shown by Bhagavan.
Right. So along the same lines, we'll look at Neṟis 42.
இது எங்கிருந்து தோன்றிற்று, இதன் மூலம் என்ன என்னும் ஆராய்ச்சியை எழுப்பு முகத்தால் கற்பனை கடந்த பொருளை காட்டவே கற்பனை வந்த காரணமாம்.
The reason false imagination arises is to reveal the reality that transcends those imaginary appearances by instigating the inquiry as to where from did they arise and what is their source.
This is an interesting take, isn't it, by Muruganar?
Yes, we don't have to follow Muruganar on this path if we choose to just dwell on the self and not ask the question, why should the self create this wonderful show for us to watch? But I think most of people find it useful to think of, if the self is the most perfect thing, it would want to see itself, to revel in its own beauty, and it sort of creates this illusion of the ego so we can destroy it and merge back into it. And that's what we call the Leela of the self. We don't have to follow down that path if we don't want to, but it's an uplifting, creative and beautiful idea to see the thought, see the self as something reveling in its own beauty. I'll read out what I've said there. There's no harm to repeat it. There cannot be an answer to the question of why the ego appears, because being unreal, it never existed in the first place. Muruganar, however, gives us a useful way of looking at the question. He suggests to us that the self creates the illusion of the ego simply in order that it may reveal itself to itself through self-investigation, in which the ego is annihilated, thus reveling in its own transcendent perfection. This is commonly called the Leela, or sport of the divine.
So we are all part of the Leela.
Yes, the dance.
Okay, so this is a long Neṟis, 43.
ஆன்ம சுபாவ நிலையான மரணம் உண்மை மரணம் போல ஆறுயிர்களை மறுட்டல் மனோமயமான ஜீவபோத வடிவ கிருத்திரிம விபரீத ஞானமாம். அதனாலன்றே சிவபோதம் பரபோதம் அல்லது சுத்த சைத்தன்ய சுரூபமான முக்திக்கு முன் அஞ்ஞானம் அழிய வேண்டுவதாகின்றது. அகந்தை நாசம், ஆன்ம சமர்ப்பணம், தன்னிழப்பு, மனோநாசம், வாசனாக்ஷயம் முதலிய பரியாயங்களான் முடிந்த முக்தி உபாயமாக நூல்கள் சிறப்பித்து கூறுவது அம்மரணத்தையே ஆக அறிக. திருவாச்சக சத்திலாப்பத்தம் அப்பொருளையே நுதலியதாம். செத்தாரைப் போல திரி என பட்டினத்தடிகளும் பணிப்பர். இதுபோல வரும் ஆன்றோர் வாக்குகள் எண்ணிலவாம்.
Go ahead, Robert, please.
People believe that the death in which one dwells as the nature of the self is physical death. This is a perverse, erroneous understanding of the ego consciousness. Therefore, it is not necessary to destroy that false understanding as a prerequisite for gaining that liberation. Therefore, is it not necessary to destroy that false understanding as a prerequisite for gaining that liberation, whose nature is pure Shiva consciousness?
Okay, from all those here in the group to dwell on this for a few seconds. It's a complex sentence. And I will read it again slowly. People believe that the death in which one dwells as the nature of the self is physical death. This is a perverse, erroneous understanding of the ego consciousness. Therefore, is it not necessary to destroy that false understanding as a prerequisite for gaining that liberation, whose nature is pure Shiva consciousness? So, go ahead. I think the Neṟis continues.
Know that which the scriptures praise as the means for final liberation, using such synonyms as the destruction of the ego, the offering up of oneself, the loss of oneself, the annihilation of the mind, and the destruction of inherited prepositions, vasanas, is only that death, the death of the ego. The decade, I have not died, in the Tiruvatchagam illustrates this point. Saint Pattinatha too, in a similar vein, sings, go about as ones who have died. Such expressions by the great saints are too numerous to count.
So, and Bhagavan frames this beautifully in Guru Ashikove, verse 858. Do you want to go ahead and read that, please, Robert?
Only by dying can we gain the realm of salvation. It is not attainable by any other means whatsoever. If it is then asked what it is to die and no longer exist, It is only through the destruction of the ideas of I and mine, and not by killing the body, which is a criminal act. This just reinforces the main point that he was making, that when the great sages speak of death, they have no sense of, they're not aware of their body, they're not thinking of a physical death, they're talking about the death of the ego, and they pray to Bhagavan for him to destroy their ego, which in most cases their ego is destroyed, but they're doing it on behalf of the devotees, who obviously still have their egos. So the poet acts the part of the devotee, saying, you know, please kill me, destroy my ego, but it's not a physical death, because the death we're talking about can happen between one thought and the next thought, or sleeping and waking up, dying and being reborn. There is no difference. Each birth of a thought is a new birth. And the only reason we think that we're that same person that keeps being dying and reborn is that we have the memories and vasanas, which attach to this body. But if they go, then each thought is a birth.
Right.
And it's a birth into death, because this birth into thought, when we forget the self, is a kind of death. And just to emphasize the point, this is what Bhagavan said about what birth really is. And it was in Virupaksha cave in 1912, when everybody was going about making a big fuss preparing for his birthday. And he said, "You who are preparing such a great celebration for my birthday, the true day of birth is the day in which you are born into the reality that shines eternally as one, having carefully examined what birth is and realized that neither birth nor death exist."
Right. That's the, yeah. I remember that. I think it's this verse occurs in.
I think it's a tiny.
Yeah, I think it comes in somewhere in Guru Ashokoi, I think, right? Don't know.
You may put it in there, yeah, because it's some of the Tani.
Oh, I think it is in Tanipakal. Sorry, yeah, it's in Upadesh Tanipakal.
But it's not a Tani. There are two. There's a second one. It says, "Why are you decorating this body?" And,
yeah, exactly. Right. I remember that. Yeah. So at this point, I will see if there are any questions from the group. Anyone has any questions? We looked at what is Chitchara Granthi, the knot that ties the sentient with the insentient. It's really another name for ego, which is basically identification of one with this body, rather than with his true nature. So, any questions?
Kumar, I'm curious why Bhagavan mentioned it being a criminal act. Were people thinking of actually destroying the body?
Yeah.
Yeah, because the body's innocent. There may be rare circumstances where the body's in so much suffering that some form of, some sort of merciful suicide, that would be very rare. But all the sages say that the body has nothing to do with the reality that which you are, and that it is wrong to end the body's life, because the body is totally innocent bystander and all this. Only if the suffering is intolerable, then maybe it would be allowed to end your life. But the actual word is Murugan uses irika. Is it sin, crime? You could view that in various ways. You could even view it as no, it really means a sin or a bad act of some kind. Yeah. But we don't want to put a moral dimension on it. It's not a good idea kill the body, because you'll just be lumbered with another one if you haven't sorted out this one. So
Exactly.
yeah, so the crime is a crime against your own eternal being, because you're saying, I can't stand it, I don't want this body, I'm just opting into another one.
Right. So that's why killing the body is not it's not the way to go. So Greg, you had question?
Yeah, it was just clarified for me. Somehow I was interpreting that the last line as saying that that if you've just destroyed the sense of I and mine and not killed the body, that would be a criminal act. But anyway, and I was trying to figure out what that meant, in terms of, well, in that case, what does it mean to kill the body if you've lost the sense of I and mine? But what was just explained, I was totally misinterpreting what it was saying at the end.
The syntax taken over.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm sorry.
You're welcome. Thank you. Good. So now let's go to Neṟis 55.
உண்மையில் அமரரான மக்கள் மனமாகிய மதுபான மயக்கத்தால் அறிவு கலங்கி அந்தோ பாவம் மரராக மரித்து கழிகின்றார். என்று அம்மதுபான மயக்கம் தீர்வரோ அன்றே மீண்டும் தம் இயல்பான பழைய அமரத்துவமடைந்து விளங்குவர். மனமே பிரமாத வடிவான மரணம் என்பது நம் மகரிஷிகள் கண்ட உண்மை. தாம் ஆணையிட்டதனை ஆணையிட்டபடியே ஏனென்று கேளாது இயற்ற வேண்டும் என்று மக்களை வற்புறுத்தி வேதங்கள் விதிப்பது மனமே கூடாதவற்றை கூட்டுவிப்பதும் நல்லதை கெட்டதும் கெட்டதை நல்லதுமாக மருட்டுவதுமான விசித்திர மாயா சக்தி ஆதலால் அத்தகைய மனத்தால் மட்டுமே சனாதன தர்மஸ்வரூபம் இன்னதென்று யாராலும் மதித்தற்கரிதென்னும் இக்காரணம் பற்றியேயாம். எனவே பலபடியாலும் மனிதனுக்கு மனத்தின் தொடர்பு அறவே கூடியத்தக்கதென்பதாம்.
Go ahead, Rob.
By consuming the intoxicating liquor of delusion, which is the mind, human beings, who are in reality immortal, become mentally confused and, alas and alack, live and die as mortals. The moment they are free of that intoxicating liquor of delusion, they at once recover their former immortality, which is their true nature, and glory in it. The truth that our great Maharishis revealed is that the mind is simply the death which takes the form of the forgetting of our true nature.
So by consuming the intoxicating liquor of delusion, which is the mind, human beings who are in reality immortal become mentally confused and, alas and alack, live and die as mortals. The moment they are free of that intoxicating liquor of delusion, they at once recover their former immortality, which is their true nature, and glory in it. So it's just spontaneous, right? So the moment they're free of this intoxicating liquor of delusion, he says.
Which is the Jadagram theory we're talking about.
Right. And then he goes on to say, the truth that our great Maharishis revealed is that the mind is simply the death which takes the form of forgetting our true nature. That's the pramada, right?
Yes.
Okay. And the Neṟis continues. Go ahead, please.
The Vedas strongly enjoin mankind to obey their command exactly as they command it, without asking why. But the mind possesses a wondrous power of delusion, Maya Shakti, which causes it to associate with that which is forbidden and deceives us into thinking that what is good is bad and what is bad is good. It is for this very reason that it is impossible for anyone employing only such a mind to grasp what is the nature of the eternal law, Sanatana Dharma, which is difficult for anyone to grasp. Therefore, we might say that in a number of ways, man's association with the mind is entirely to be rejected.
So I read it one more time for to reflect. The Vedas strongly enjoin mankind to obey their command exactly as they command it without asking why. But the mind possesses a wondrous power of delusion, Maya Sakti, which causes it to associate with that which is forbidden and deceives us into thinking that what is good is bad and what is bad is good. It is for this very reason that it is impossible for anyone employing only such a mind to grasp what is the nature of the eternal Lord, Sanatana Dharma, which is difficult for anyone to grasp. Therefore, we might say that in a number of ways, man's association with the mind is entirely to be rejected. So you use the word entirely to be rejected, right? What is the Tamil word you use for that? Entirely.
Arave.
Yeah. So like right from the root sort of reminds me of verse 1 of
Kadia means to chastise as well. Kadia Sakalam.
So it's almost like the verse 1 of Akshamanamala, right? Arunachalaman Ahame Nipavar Agate Vera Rupoy, from the root.
Yes, it is
Completely. Yeah. So you have some comments on it. Please go ahead.
Yeah, it struck me that we've talked about ego in a variety of ways, but one of the ways it deceives us is by making us think that it's, you know, that what's right is right and what's right is wrong, what's wrong is right. So I wrote this comment. Muruganar here expands further on the nature of the mind and the nature eradicated. In this Neṟis, he emphasizes the mind's power of delusion and Maya Shakti, which he says can deceive us into thinking what is bad is good and what is good is bad. This is I think I've
this is, yeah, typo.
This, of course, is one of the most valuable weapons in the ego's arsenal, because if it can convince us that the wrong course of action is the right one, it can just sit back and watch us as we embroil ourselves further on the mistaken path. It is important for sadhakas, therefore, to continually evaluate their progress on their chosen path. They need to ask themselves whether they're experiencing an increase of clarity, calmness and peace on their path, or the reverse. We often find that we embark on a course of study and we read one book and we think, well, I nearly got the answer there, but if I read the next book by this other author, and the ego leads us on this way thinking that we're refining our knowledge, when in fact we're just embroidering it and making it more complex. So we need to be aware that the ego can catch us out in this way by putting us on the wrong path and convincing us that it is in fact the right one. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay, so at this point, I will open up for questions on all the Neṟis we discussed today. Anyone who has any questions or comments, please go ahead.
Kumar, the last slide.
Yeah.
Robert's comment.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I was very interested.
Sure.
I was very interested in that line. It is important for sadhakas, therefore, to continually evaluate their progress on their chosen path. And I completely agree. Without continually evaluating, it's like flying without gauges or anything, you know. trying to fly. But one side effect I have noticed from this is that there becomes a tendency of using that evaluation on other people and judging them.
You shouldn't.
Yes, that's true.
You should not even think about it. You should not ask how the other person is doing. You should only worry about you. You should only be concerned about finding who you are. And same thing goes for me and for everyone else here.
Well, that's another ego trick, isn't it? It
Exactly.
invites you to compare yourself with other people and say, oh, well, I'm not doing as good as him. I'd better follow his path. And then you just get even further lost and lose your focus even more.
Right.
So other people are also,
go ahead.
Other peoples are also figments of our imagination in the dream that we weave, right?
It's like being in a dream and then asking the other people in the dream how to wake up or something.
Right. Yeah, I find that when there's compare, that's automatically a pitfall. That's part of the ego when the compare comes in, period. And then there's the should. The should is where there is an assessment without agreement. So if there's something that should be a certain way, what agreement had that should be in place? So once should comes out of my mouth, or once I put in place a compare, it's automatically ego participating.
Right. Yeah, that should never be such thing. No, we should never compare, because the problem is one's own ego is the problem, right? So we just need to attend to that, find what it is, and then we find that it truly doesn't exist. And
Kumar,
yes.
Sorry if I may interject a little bit. It's not actually comparing. Excuse me. It's like if you are evaluating yourself, you're learning a new skill. It's like
right.
It's like you're putting on you don't have spectacles. You're putting on spectacles to see yourself clear, and now you have that new vision, and that new vision automatically falls on other people. Is what I'm saying. So I guess you have to practice not to make it fall on other people. I mean, take your spectacles off.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, you just have to practice that, and you bring out a good point. I mean, it's human nature, right? To sort of see, okay, compare and all those things. We do it in every other aspect of worldly life, but when as far as this is concerned, even in other aspects, you shouldn't really. But as far as this is concerned, more so, you should only be focused on your own practice.
It's just another example of projection, where we project our own ideas onto somebody else, and that's the root of all evils. The reason people argue is because they project their own view of what's right onto another person, and the person doesn't live up to it. So basically, yeah, once you recognize it, just don't do it.
Right.
Cool. Thank you.
And also, it's very important to focus on that point. Evaluating means it's basically, the clarity that you feel, the calmness that you feel. That's all. I mean, so you want to keep that simple. Don't want to overdo that, either. So, automatically, the extent to which that you're having an inclination to read Bhagavan's works, to attend satsangs, that itself shows that you have a liking for it, and that is a progress metric, right? That itself shows that you're progressing. That you have you're liking it, and then you're feeling the calmness. So yeah, I'm just emphasizing the fact that we want to keep it simple.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
We will conclude this session.